Behind medieval walls, a secret has survived for over 1,000 years. Enduring time and harsh winds, one symbol remains: the Maltese Cross. Not just a decoration, but a symbol of order, balance, and protection. For centuries, it stood in the midst of war and disease, protecting lives. But what if this symbol is not just history? What if it still exists today in the same form? Have you seen this symbol before? On medieval shields and even today on ambulances. For over 1,000 years, the same symbol has remained. In moments of emergency, at the center of saving lives, this symbol appears: the Maltese Cross. Why has it never disappeared? Is it just tradition? Or does it represent a deeper principle of protecting life? This question leads us beyond history, into structure. They were not warriors. 11th century Jerusalem, a time when countless pilgrims collapsed from disease and hunger. And then they appeared. Not with swords, but with bandages and medicine. The Knights Hospitaller. They did not begin with war, but with healing, caring for the wounded, protecting lives. And on their chest, one symbol: the Maltese Cross. Not a symbol of power, but of protection, balance, and recovery. The most feared weapon of the battlefield: Greek fire. Flames that could not be extinguished even with water. Once ignited, it consumed everything. But in that moment, they did not run. They stepped into the fire, wrapping others with their own clothes, extinguishing flames with bare hands. A choice to risk their own lives to save others. And what people remembered was one thing: the white cross, visible even in the flames. From that moment, this symbol became a mark of sacrifice and rescue. But here is something unexpected. What if the Maltese Cross is not just a symbol? What if it appears in a completely different place? In soap. As soap forms and slowly solidifies under specific conditions, when light passes through, a cross-shaped pattern begins to appear, a structure that closely resembles the Maltese Cross. This is not a coincidence. It is the moment when hidden order becomes visible. And now, we are about to see that structure for ourselves. The idea of cleanliness and hygiene, once represented by the Knights of Malta, continued through time into industrial America. But early soap was very different from what we know today. Made from animal fats and alkali, with limited refining, it was often dark and had a strong odor. It could clean, but it was far from the smooth, pure soap we expect today. And at that point, something began to change. (1837) Cincinnati. A candle maker, William Proctor, and a soap maker, James Gamble, came together to form a company, Procter & Gamble. In 1879, they introduced a new kind of soap, ivory soap. It was bright, highly refined, and labeled 99.44% pure. But it had another unusual feature: it floated. This happened because of tiny air pockets formed during manufacturing. And this raised a new question: what kind of structure exists inside soap? Scientists became curious. Does soap simply harden? Or is something more complex happening inside? Francis B. Roseveare, a researcher at P&G, focused on this question. As soap melts and cools again, he began to observe what was changing. To see what was invisible, he turned to a special tool, a polarized light microscope. This light microscope reveals patterns of light when molecules are aligned in order. As the soap slowly cooled, something unexpected appeared. A cross-shaped pattern of light radiating from the center. It looked like the Maltese Cross. This was not a coincidence. It was a signal that molecules were not random, but forming an ordered structure. For the first time, hidden order became visible. This was not just a shape. Researchers realized this pattern was connected to lamellar liquid crystal structure. Soap was not simply solidifying. During cooling, it was forming layers, organizing itself. Molecules aligning on their own, self-assembly, order creating structure. And this leads to a new question. Does this kind of structure exist in nature? More importantly, could the same order be found in our skin? Now, we are about to find that answer. In the previous session, we observed the Maltese Cross pattern inside soap. It was not just a shape, but a structure formed by molecules aligning themselves. This leads to a question. Does this structure exist only in soap, or does it exist inside our body? What if the symbol from 1,000 years ago and the structure found in soap also exist inside our skin today? Now, the story moves to skin. In 1983, the outermost layer of the skin, the stratum corneum, was thought to be just dead cells. But one discovery changed this understanding. Professor Peter Elias. He showed that this layer is not a residue, but a highly organized defense system. The so-called brick-and-mortar model. Skin was not random. It was a structured system. In this structure, the key was not the cells themselves. It was the lipids between the cells. Cells are stacked like bricks, and the lipids act as mortar. This lipid structure prevents water loss and blocks external irritants and microbes. In other words, the essence of the skin barrier is not the cells, but the structure between them, the lamellar arrangement. Then, what does this lipid structure look like? In 1995, researchers extracted lipids from healthy skin and observed them under a polarized light microscope. When light passed through, a cross-shaped pattern appeared. The Maltese Cross, the same structure seen in soap. This was evidence that skin lipids are not random, but form an ordered structure. So what happens when this structure breaks down? Water evaporates quickly and the skin barrier weakens. This leads to a question. Can this structure be rebuilt? Researchers began designing materials that mimic skin lipids and systems that form lamellar structures. And under the microscope, the same Maltese Cross pattern appeared again. This is not just hydration. It is an approach to restore the structural order of the skin. The answer was confirmed through research. In 2001, a study analyzed how skin barrier structure changes and reforms after damage. The results were clear. In damaged skin, the lamellar structure collapses, water loss increases, and barrier function weakens. But when materials with skin-like lipid structure were applied, lamellar layers reformed between the cells. Disordered structure became ordered again. This is not just hydration, it is the restoration of skin structure. That is why we still observe, to confirm whether this structure forms and whether that order is truly reproduced.